So I was brought up in a pretty relaxed environment. For most of my childhood, my mom was a single mother, and religion wasn't really the central part of our lives. She was too busy trying to provide for me and my little brother who had autism. For most of my life, that was sort of the reality. Like, oh, sometimes we go to the masjid and pray, and sometimes we pray maybe 2 or 3 times a day at home. Things sort of changed when my mom married my stepdad, and he was a convert to Islam, so he was a bit more zealous than we were, and it was a bit of a departure from what we were used to because now we were praying more frequently. We were becoming more part of the Muslim community.
For a while, that was a problem. He was a bit more, sort of concerned with all the rules and the laws and this madhab, that thing, and Malikis do it this way. And I'm like, in India, it's all a big mosh thing, like you don't really, you take the best of whatever you can say. So I think that was a source of, friction for us. I mean, the extremes that he was willing to go with diet, and like we weren't allowed to eat Milano cookies all of a sudden.
No vanilla extract.
No vanilla extract. Oh,
it has alcohol.
This soy sauce is suspect. That sort of thing. It made everyday living difficult.
Well, I was raised a Catholic, and went to church, did communion, all that. So fast forward a bit to college. I became involved in activism against the Iraq War and met a lot of good friends. We fought the good fight together, but we lost. And a lot of those friends were Muslim. And in my attempts to make sense of what happened, I really began looking at Islam. And from what I understood of it at the time, what I had read about it, it really did seem like a true rational monotheism. It had a focus on ethics. It didn't have all the abstruse theological questions that Christianity had about the Trinity and how many angels can dance on the head of a pin and all that nonsense. So it really appealed to me. And then any of the unsavory aspects I could just dismiss as something that is a problem for fundamentalists. And I'm surely not a fundamentalist. But then I went on a trip to Pakistan and for a wedding. And when I came back, I became much more religious. I started to really study the religion more deeply, started learning Arabic, and before I knew it, I was defending opinions that I would have excoriated myself. As part of the process of examining the religion, I started to really look at the core sources of Islam, looking at more deeply at the Quran and the Hadith and fiqh, which is religious law. I even studied at a madrasa for a couple of years part-time. And again, I realized that all the all these horrible things about women, about LGBT people, about non-believers, this was not just an aspect of fundamentalism. It was also part and parcel of traditional Islam itself, and I couldn't defend that anymore. So what was really disturbing was the fact that I realized inwardly that I didn't believe this anymore. I was actually still teaching at an Islamic school at the time, so that was also a complication because it's like, well, this is my livelihood, how I support my family. And then looking at my family itself, Islamic law says that a non-Muslim man cannot be married to a Muslim woman. So I'm just terrified that if, my wife finds out that's going to be the end. We'll get divorced. I won't have, as much access to my kids. I won't be able to spend time with them. So I was very terrified about that. So I started actually bringing up little criticisms, and I was thinking that was clever and and slowly sowing doubt.
I remember he told me all the historical inaccuracies, and that really sort of, you question certain things, and you sort of explain it by saying, oh, it's a text written at that time, this, that, but no one ever, asked me those kind of questions that made me realize that it's inaccurate. It's just wrong. This is not when this happened. So then that whole idea of it being untouchable, the Quran, right? That sort of shattered. And after that, it was just no going back, really. You can't just sort of believe again.
As a Muslim, I was constantly worried about this tremendous duty I have to my kids, not just to provide for them, not just to try and be a good example for them, but I also have to make sure that they observe all these little rituals, follow all these rules, and if they don't, then they'll be punished, I'll be punished, and it's not conducive to having a healthy relationship with your kids.
The real thing for me was, is she kind? Is she going to be curious about life, you know? And religion doesn't allow you to ask questions, especially does not allow women to ask questions. It does not give women avenues, you know, to be curious.
So the day I left my faith was when I was 16, between sophomore and junior year of high school. I was sleeping in on a Saturday morning, as I am apt to do, and my mom sort of like shuffles into the room and tries to wake me up.
We were waiting for that child to wake up, you know, like we had decided in the morning, and it's like, oh, it's the afternoon, she's not waking up, and like we had amped ourselves up to say it.
Then she says like, so yeah, we're not really Muslim anymore. You can leave Islam with us, but maybe you should think about it. And that, of course, kind of rang in my ears a little bit, because I was like, it had never occurred to me before that leaving Islam was an option, despite how bitter I was towards it. For a lot of ex-Muslims, like deciding whether or not you want to leave is like a very long process. It takes like years to kind of come to terms with it. But for me, it was just like the first chance I got, like it was a snap decision.
What really surprised me was that the revelation that she was, to a great extent, humoring us the whole time.
Yes.
But that's a pleasant surprise, to be honest.
No, it was kind of, I was like, gosh, we were doing this to her, like putting this on her this whole time, you know, because she was just, it's almost like she didn't even think. We were like sort of reassuring her, look, even though we don't believe anymore, you don't have to, you know, agree with us. We will help you. We will even, you know, I was thinking that I'll even like take her to the mosque and stuff if she wants to go, even though we were never mosque going people. So, but I was willing to sort of I was ready to accept anything she said. I just was not expecting her to be like, yeah, of course, I'm leaving. I would leave this behind as well.
And she started texting everybody.
It was like immediate, and it was apparently she's had all these doubts and questions, but she was sort of trying to be sensitive to us.
Right after the day of my apostasy, I sort of noticed more like my parents were like happily swapping books on atheism and stuff. And I feel like through this sort of shared experience of leaving religion, that we've become more closer and more warmer as a family, just because, you know, we can talk about things now a little more. There's no secrets or anything. I still feel like some of the negative impacts from religion, for example, showing skin. I still feel like twinges of like shame and embarrassment if I wear like short dresses or skirts or shorts. That, and being in a romantic relationship, whenever I like hang out with my boyfriend or hold his hand in public. There was also, I struggled a lot with like my bisexuality and sort of coming to terms with that. Around like the beginning of high school, I noticed I was having crushes on girls as well as boys. And just from like, I guess from like religious settings, like, you know, you're not supposed to like the same sex. So when I sort of realized I was having these crushes, I felt like this weird like self-disgust, like I was creepy and stuff. And that stayed with me a lot even after leaving. It sort of took me a while to kind of accept that a bit. I think 2 years later I sort of came out properly to like my parents and stuff, and they were very supporting. But it was just this weird sort of self-battle that I had to come to terms with it. If I were still Muslim, I would still be I'd be very different from how I was now, because I feel like ever since I left, I've become more confident as a person and more open to new ideas and such, because being in a sort of a religion that mandates that you follow certain beliefs sort of cuts you off from other ideas and other people talking about them.